You are listening to The Power of Peace with Kit Cummings. Kit delivers his thought-provoking perspectives on mental health, addiction, and incarceration, especially as it pertains to the youth, as well as other relevant firebrand issues. He also shares his 12-year journey working within the schools, juvenile courts, juvenile prisons, and with law enforcement. With a wide variety of guests, Kit digs deep into these fascinating topics to share solutions and success stories of how peace paved the way to lasting change for so many who have experienced the Power of Peace Project. He aims to shatter the stigmas surrounding mental illness, addiction, and incarceration, as well as other issues dividing our nation.
Hey everybody, Kit Cummings, Power of Peace Podcast, powered by the Power of Peace Productions, which supports the Power of Peace Project, which is our 501c3 nonprofit, and our work with underserved youth, interrupting and redirecting kids that are on a perilous course and setting them firmly on the pathway to extraordinary dreams. The Power of Peace.
What's up, everybody? Kit Cummings. Welcome to the Power of Peace Podcast. Here we go a lot of different places, and I think touch on things that are not only relevant, but I think fascinating, and also things that I think will really help a lot of people. This is an episode that I've been looking forward to, but also kind of with trepidation, because we have an expert who I'm about to introduce. With my work over the years, what people are saying, whether it be live events or things I do, is I'm ridiculously vulnerable. And I don't know, I think it was an evolution of my work over the past 12 or 13 years, especially the work I do in the prisons and a lot with young people. I think I learned just to be in prison. I could talk about whatever I want to talk about, I'm saying? And it was cathartic. And so, we've done one on addiction, and I've been wanting to do one on mental health, and we're hearing more and more about it. We live in what I would say a chaotic world. There's a lot going on. It's a divided nation, whether it's economy, race, religion, gender, politics, we go on and on. There's a divide, and people are, digging in, choosing sides and shouting louder. But when we see, I think the pandemic, which we're going to talk about, if need be in a second, how that might have exacerbated the situation with, mental health issues. Also, we see this rash of shootings, and then afterwards, people are starting to talk about, we've got to do something about mental health and help people that are out there. Anxiety and depression are on the rise, and but there's many truly suffering in silence. And I'm going to share about my life and my journey. And luckily, that's not where I am today. I've got tools and resources, and one of them is our guest. And he's not just an expert in his field, but he's a dear friend, a brother. We've been knowing each other for over 20 years. It was early 90s. And so our friendship was very spiritual and still is. And you're going to love him. He's a blast. Love Star Wars. I know that.
Star Trek, yeah, Star Trek.
Oh, Star Trek, my bad. Well, let me go ahead and read a little bio. Then I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Michael Shapiro. He's the director of behavioral medicine at Duke Medical School's Southern Regional Area Health Education Center, where he participates in education and training of physicians going through a 3-year residency program in family medicine. He's been a clinical psychologist for over 40 years and was in private practice in Athens, Georgia for 30 years prior to moving to North Carolina 5 years ago. He and his wife, Dr. Mary Shapiro, have lectured extensively, both domestically and abroad, and given workshops on topics related to child psychology, parenting, marriage, adoption, mental health issues in a Christian context. They've authored 2 books, the first of which, Rejoice Always, a manual for Christians facing emotional challenges, which recently came out in its 2nd edition, and Understanding Sexual Behavior in Children, how to be proactive in educating and protecting your children. So want to introduce Dr. Michael Shapiro, my friend, my brother, and everything else. And I'll tell you what else he is in my life in a second. But welcome, Mike. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure being here.
And I think this will be it'll be entertaining, and I want it to be kind of free flow, but we're going to touch on a lot of things, and I want to just go ahead and jump right in. It appears that mental health the topic, but especially mental illness, is on the rise. And I'm not sure if that is because more and more people are struggling, or if it's starting to become more talked about. The awareness is increasing. So in your experience, are you seeing a rise? And if so, why?
Yeah, there's no question, Kit. It is mental illness, mental disorders. We might make a distinction between those two in a few minutes, but no doubt about it, very much on the rise. And unfortunately, that's a hard question to answer because there's so many different reasons. You touched on some of them. One has to do with better awareness, no doubt about it. As more research is done, we actually find more things that are disorders that we didn't before. We used to think this was just a little problem or a quirk in personality or something like that. Then we find out there are thousands or millions of people suffering these same symptoms. So we came up with some consensus about what that means. We give a name to that disorder, and we add it to our, there's something called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is kind of a catalog of these mental illnesses. And that thing over the years, just since I've been in practice, has gone from this thick to this thick.
Wow.
Really, once again, a lot of research, we understand things better. We come to a consensus about what these symptoms mean, and we label them. But also at the same time, definitely, you're right, much more awareness. There used to be such a stigma around mental health issues, especially, and this is going to sound weird, but in the male population, men, we were, in my day, I'm old, we were taught, you don't complain, you don't whine, you put your head down and you barrel through and you stuff your feelings. So that's very much, there's still some of that. And in other countries outside the United States, Mary and I do a lot of workshops in other countries. That's still very much the case, but it's becoming less so here in the States. More people understand, I'm not the only one with a mental illness. So there's less stigma, more discussion about it, and so forth.
Yeah.
The one I want to complain about, though, is when it comes to kids and adolescents.
Okay.
Where these problems are just going through the roof. And I'm going to blame, some of it still applies, better awareness of these disorders and so forth, but I'm going to blame social media.
Okay.
If there's, it seems to me, if there's a problem in this world, you can point to social media and catch a good percentage of those. But on the good side, social media has kind of normalized mental health problems for teenagers. So on the good side, they can get online and look at these groups and say, I thought it was just me having these feelings or these thoughts, or I thought it was just me going through this.
Right.
So on the good side, they now know that's not the case. On the bad side, there are these websites that perpetuate acting out behaviors and suicidal ideation and threats and things like that. There are actually websites that will teach kids how to do self-harming behavior, how to commit suicide. There are websites where a kid might have a thought, there's something wrong with me, and they hook up with these other kids, and the other kids convince them there's something wrong with them. Wow. You're just like me, you're just like us, and this is a huge problem, and this is what you need to do about it. So I'm going to a great extent, when it comes to youth, blame social media for the steep rise in problems in that population.
Wow. And that in my work, probably 80% is youth now. Mm-hmm. And I work with kids that we would say are in trouble, kids that are at great risk in our schools, especially underserved, under-resourced schools. But then I also work in the juvenile courts with a program called Rising, and that's kids that have caught a charge under probation and look like they're headed for the gang life. And this is an accountability court where if they successfully complete it, which is not easy, their record is sealed and their charges are expunged, and it's a true second chance. They can, choose never been convicted, and anybody could put, police, judges could put their name into a computer, and it's if it never happened. So I'm excited about that. But it's interesting, and I'll be in the courthouse today. There is, I hear new terms all the time, when we do a psych eval and they come back and it's oppositional defiance disorder. And I'm like, I never heard about that one. And then cannabis something disorder. It's like, really? So back in the day it was smoking weed. It's like, and then on and on. And I'm like, wow. And, one of the things that has been a challenge for me is the labeling. Now, I know in your world, the more they understand, you've got to, you got to name it, and you've got to help people understand it. But for those that suffer with it, the labels are scary, and I do think the young people, they grew up with social media, and it's kind of cool to show. Even folks, grown folks are showing people their lives. Back in the day, you didn't tell anybody your business.
Right.
And now
That's right.
it's like you have to. I've got a flu. I mean, we don't want to know that. You know what I'm saying? But the kids, and I learned this from my kids, they are much more comfortable saying I am, and whether it's ADHD or on the spectrum or bipolar or depressed or anxiety. And so I think there's more of an openness, but I do, relate to what you're talking about as far as I think it would be so challenging to be 15, 16, 17 in this world, and you have to choose a label, and then, the gender issues, people are choosing sides on that, but it's got to be a very confusing time for these kids. And one of the reasons why this show really for years has been like, I know I'm going to talk about it, but it's got to be the right time in the right format where I felt like, my career could handle it. And I'm going to talk about how you and I got connected on this issue. But I pretty much had talked to my wife and talked to my closest friends and talked to my psychiatrist and everybody said, yes, 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 people need this. People need to see that you can not only have a decent life, it's not a sentence, you can have an extraordinary life, even living with one of these labels, although you've got to manage it. And so, you and I, it was 20 years ago, I came to you because I was experiencing things I had never experienced. I went into a depression, and it wasn't just that I was kind of blue, kind of sad because it was circumstantial. It was physical. It was heavy. It was like a weight was pulling me down. I didn't want to go out of the house. I'm one of the most social people you're gonna find. And then as I got through this season that I'd never been before, I wasn't like, I must be clinically depressed. I just knew something was up. But then all of a sudden I went the other way and I tore some stuff up, and you remember it. And okay, that one was like, okay, what the heck is going on? Because I'm like, every idea seemed like a good one, very impulsive. I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And you can make some crazy decisions. I shouldn't use that word, but you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I feel like, and I want to talk about this a little bit, nowadays, because there are so many labels, and you got parents that are dealing with kids and they've heard about all this and they see a sign or they feel a thing or whatever. I'm finding that a lot of the kids I'm working with, I say, how were you diagnosed? And it's like, mom, dad took me to their primary physician, said he's feeling this, and they started testing medication.
Mhm.
And I want to know how you feel about that, because you and I remember it was a battery of tests. It was the gold standard, Rorschach or whatever his name is, and cognitive things and shapes. And I was just like confused. Right. But at the end of it, I got a diagnosis, and it was bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. And whoa, it's like for 20 years, you keep that a secret, especially for your friends. And that it kind of scared me. But what do you think about that, about how we're diagnosing and how maybe we're pushing people towards some of these things?
Well, the labeling issue is a double-edged sword. We've got to have labels to know how to treat. It's a big algorithm. If we see a patient, they come in with these symptoms, we can say you have this disorder, and we know from the research that you treat this disorder with these medications or these kinds of therapy. So labels are a good thing in that respect. We know what we're looking at. Labels are a bad thing when patients use them to justify their own behavior. I've got kids that do this all the time. Well, I've got ADHD. You can't blame me for, throwing a rock at my neighbor's window. Or, well, I've got a major mood disorder like depression. That's why I skip work. And, sometimes that's just, it can be used inappropriately. I don't want to say using it as an excuse, but it can certainly be used inappropriately. The problem is this, the evaluation I did with you, I make it a point to do very thorough evaluations before we give any label. Why? Because so many of these disorders and mental illnesses look like a million other disorders and illnesses. Mm-hmm. You have to sort out what's what, especially in kids. And going back to the ADHD as an example, a million things look like ADHD in kids. Kids, when they get depressed, they're not like adults. When adults get depressed, they get vegetative and they sleep and they cry all the time and they don't want to do anything. Kids, it's just the opposite. They get active and irritable and inattentive, just like kids with ADHD. So you really need a good evaluation to sort out what's what. And sometimes it's multiple things. It's not only ADHD, but it's, like you said, oppositional defiant disorder or something else. So in my opinion, you really got to do a really good evaluation to come up with the right labels to know how to treat. Unfortunately, there's just not enough mental health professionals to go around.
Wow.
As you can see by gang involvement, school shootings, stuff like that. If we could have intervened long ago, maybe this wouldn't have happened. So what happens is, you mentioned in the introduction, part of my job is training young physicians who are becoming primary practice family care physicians. So what ends up happening is, fortunately, where I work, if one of my young physicians comes to me and says, this patient is presenting with this symptom and that symptom and that symptom, what do you think I should do? We can do that right away. We've got a very self-contained clinic here. So in real time, I can say, why don't you try this medication or that medication, or he needs this or that, or I need to do an evaluation first. The problem is, with the absence of mental health professionals in the real world, a lot of this falls on these poor primary care physicians who don't have psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers to consult with. So these poor primary care docs, the family physicians and the pediatricians, have people just coming in their doors and saying, I have this mental problem and that behavioral problem. What do I do? And a lot of times they just don't have the resources to get an evaluation like I do. So God bless them, they treat empirically. Well, you've got this symptom and this is the medication we use for that symptom. Come back in a month. Oh, now we've got this symptom. Now this has caused sleeplessness. So now we're going to add this medication. So it's not the best way to do things, empirical treatment with medication to come up with a diagnosis. It's much better to do the evaluation you did with me, but we don't have the resources to do that. So I'm trying to train my young family physicians, stay in your lane. I'm going to help train you to do this much, but if it gets more complicated than that, you really need to refer out. Okay. I got a referral. The young physicians here go through a 3-year residency and then they're on their own. And I saw so after they graduate, they go to different places. I actually saw a patient yesterday who was sent by one of my graduates from years ago. And she said that this patient told me, that doctor wouldn't put me on any medication until I came here to see you. So I felt great about that. Yeah. But unfortunately, that just can't be done. So it all falls on the primary care physician.
Yeah. Well, a big part of my story is not just addiction, which I've done a whole show on that, which is not enough, but my journey through addiction. You learn how to handle it, but also my complicated relationship with my father, who passed young. And I think that in a lot of ways, I inherited some things from him. I don't know, I want to know your opinion on that. But for me, I'm not sure, but I feel now that maybe he suffered from some of the same things. But he was a generation where you don't talk about your feelings. You don't go to the doctor. I'm not sick. And it literally led to, him passing young, which was a big deal for me. So when I came to you, actually, my parents had, I call it checking under the hood. I want to know how this thing works, right? And so when I was a teenager, we kind of did a version of that, but there was no diagnosis. That was way back in the 70s or whatever it was, early 80s. But then when I was, mid 40s, I came to you, about 40, kind of 40, which is a little later. I think a lot of times it tends to jump on people in their mid 20s. But anyway, when I got the diagnosis, it was in a sense a relief, because I feel like, that there's a reason. And I didn't resist it. And then we did it again. So really, I mean, when I was young, midlife, and then probably 55, I'm about to be 59, I came to North Carolina, we did it again. And so I wanted to, it's not that I thought, oh, I don't have it anymore. I just wanted to see. And you said, your brain is the same. And I call it my fascinating brain. Yeah, I'm not into labels, right? But with that, I also didn't resist medication, which a lot of people do. I was looking for answers. My routines are everything, whether it be medication, close friends and family who understand and can help manage, or show me things I can't see. But also my routines are so important. And the therapy, having some sort of therapy in my life, things my dad didn't. So my question is, I don't know if that's typical, because a lot of times people might not embrace it, might, deny it, avoid it, escape from it, whatever. Would you say it's a disease or a disorder? And is there a genetic component? That helped me. I didn't feel like it was a character defect and something was wrong with me. It just kind of made sense.
Yeah, there's no doubt. A lot of these illnesses, depression, anxiety disorders, thought disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, a lot of them clearly, without doubt, have a genetic component. So that's why, as part of my evaluation, I always ask, is there anyone in your family that's ever suffered with anything like this? And then knowing that there were people like your dad in your dad's generation, I'll often say, even if they were never treated or diagnosed formally with depression or something like that, did they have any other problems? For example, is there any alcoholism anywhere in your family? Oh yeah, I had my grandfather or my great uncle was a terrible alcoholic. Back in those days, that person might have been self-medicating a depression or a mania or something like that. So there's clearly a genetic component. You definitely have to look back at the family. I forget the rest of what you were asking.
Disease, disorder, is it
Oh,
the
yeah.
same? I mean,
Thank you. So usually it's kind of a issue of semantics. A disorder, a disease is something wrong, is something physically wrong with the brain or the body. A
okay.
disorder, we used to apply that to conditions we didn't understand if they had a biological component to it.
Right.
So obsessive compulsive disorder. Well, we call it that because there's no, at least until recently, there was nothing we could look at in the brain, no tumor, no blood test to verify it. So we weren't sure it's biological, but so that's why we call it a disorder. But more and more over time, we're certainly finding out a strong genetic component and very much biological causes to a lot of these things, not only neurochemical, or what my patients usually say, do I have a chemical imbalance? But even right down to the cellular level of the brain, the way neurons are arranged and so forth. So this sounds terrible, but I tend to look at these things more as disease states, or rather than disorders, really as mental illness. And we can tackle part of that in treatment.
I got you, man. This is so important. Okay, so you're a parent. You've got teenagers, and I mean, we're scared. Now this generation has so many threats and risks, and things that can get them in trouble. I know this is a very general question, but what are some of the signs? And let's talk about kind of young people, and I'll throw this in there too. I work with kids, part of my work in juvenile prisons, and these are kids that grew up tough, in and out of the streets, in and out of the system, a lot of them through defects or, single parent households, poverty, generational poverty, and then the streets, the gangs come in, this low hanging fruit. And so kids that are the most vulnerable, kids that are wounded, are easy prey, for those that are going to get them in and then work them, and they don't understand how that works. And so, is there, or what would you say to a parent? And I'm not saying necessarily in my work with the kids that are in big trouble, but you've got a kid in high school, middle school, whatever. What are some of the signs that would point them in the direction is we need to go get a little bit more help?
Yeah. So in the world of psychiatry and psychology, a problem isn't a problem until it interferes with something: educational, social, occupational functioning in adults. It's the same with kids. When there's a sudden change in their behavior, they're hanging out with a different peer group, or things that they used to love to do they find no interest in doing it anymore. Or when they're doing things that are sneaky or clandestine. Little kids, fortunately, are usually too naive and pleasant by nature to pull off being sneaky in a effective way. So it's very easy to tell when they're doing something clandestine or underhanded or sneaky. It's a little harder with teens, but I tell parents, the world's leading expert on your child is you. If I evaluate your child, I'm only gonna see him for, a few hours and then come up with conclusions based on my tests. You're the world's leading expert in your child. You know how that child typically behaves. You know what motivates that kid, what he gets excited about, what she likes doing outside of school. If any of that changes suddenly, now we might have something to worry about.
Okay.
So, socially, if they're not seeking out friends anymore, if they're not doing things they used to like to do, if they're being more secluded and socially isolated, kids are naturally, especially teenagers, thrive on social interaction, normal ones anyway. This is apart from kids with autism and so forth. Most kids thrive on social interaction. When that changes or decreases, now we might have a problem. And certainly, anytime a kid makes any reference to suicide or self-harm. Now, I get it. That's such a popular thing now that a lot of parents will tend to dismiss it and say, they're just doing that out of being manipulative. They're just trying to be manipulative. They don't mean it. They say that all the time. It doesn't matter. The kids who self-harm out of being manipulative end up just as dead as the ones that did it really out of deep depression.
Right.
So anytime a kid makes any reference to suicide or self-harm, you've got to run for help.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I hope a lot of parents are listening, but also kids. Shift gears a little bit. And I also do, a good bit of preaching. Mm-hmm. And I go where I'm invited. And I was a preacher for a long time. I still do in different ways.
And a good one too.
Oh no, man. You could see some of that mania back in the day.
Yeah.
It's theatrical. But anyway, one of the things that really helped me is Psalm 139, which is very important to me. It says that we are wonderfully made, and that he knit us together in the mother's womb and saw all of our days before one of them came to be. And there's more, but what I gather from that is my creator made me the way I am. And that includes my brain, my fascinating brain. And then I really relate to the Apostle Paul, and I love, his writings, but one is in 2 Corinthians 12, where he talks about this thorn in his flesh. And, to keep him from becoming conceited, he was given this thorn, and he pleaded for it to be taken away. He didn't want it. And those of us that, have been on this journey, it's like you go through that phase. It's kind of like the grieving phase, until finally, hopefully you get to that acceptance. And I don't know when that happened, but I've been there for a minute. But anyway, he said, my grace is sufficient for you. And this was the game changer for me. He said, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And so Paul said, oh, well, that means the more I boast about my weaknesses, the more power that it'll be God that's inside of me. And I respect, anybody's listening, whether their faith journey is or isn't. But for me, I embrace that. He made me the way I am. And this thorn has really, in a lot of ways, become a blessing. No, I say in every way has become a blessing, because when I'm in what I call the valley, kind of in the lower pole, it's some of my deepest, most reflective, most compassionate, most empathetic I am. It's very deep. It's challenging, but it's very deep. And then when I start to go to what I call the mountaintop, that is when some of my most brilliant ideas have shown up, and that it's like a download. It's like a flow. And that's why I can walk into a cartel prison by myself and think that's a good day. I mean, because I feel 10 feet tall. Now, I got to be careful about that. The people that love me say situational awareness, you got to know who you're hanging with. And I'm like, but they're good gangsters, So anyway, so it's like, I call them like superpowers. And where I've gotten to is I would not trade my brain with anybody's. And if you take away my addictive nature, you take away me. If you take away what we call this bipolar thing, or, where we go like this, you don't get me. I'm not me, and I like me. and then hopefully I can help some people. But when a person, and really kind of in that middle place is a beautiful place, and you can learn how to get there. But when you're in one of those states, people, good people, they want to help, and they'll come in with all kind of advice. You need to pray more. You need to study your Bible more. You just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, man. Just come on, be grateful. Look at all the positive things in your life. Or why are you moving so fast, man? Shut up, slow down. And it's challenging because I know they're well-meaning, but how would you say a spouse, a loved one, a parent, a friend should help a person they love when they are struggling with some of these things, and maybe some do's and don'ts? Because I know it pisses us off sometimes. It's like, oh, there he goes again. It's like, no, I'm just upset because, man, I should be upset. Or no, I'm a little blue. My friend died. You feel me? And so what do you think about that? Kind of how do you manage somebody?
Well, let me go back and comment on something that you said about your amazing brain and what the bipolar has done for you. And amen to that, man. Some of my favorite people, some of my favorite patients are adults and teenagers with autism or ADHD. They have such a unique way of looking at things, and often it's concordant with my little weird obsessions, and I love talking to them about different things. So you're absolutely right. The problem comes when, especially with bipolar, and I'm sure you can relate to this, when people with bipolar are in a manic phase, like you said, everything is a good idea. Every crazy thing they think of is a good idea, and they're going to pursue it. The problem is they're so manic, they don't get this done before something else catches their eye, and they do this, and then they go to do this. And some of the things they do are potentially dangerous or very risky. However, they feel great, like you allude to. Consequently, they're the hardest to treat, because when someone with bipolar is in the manic phase, they're like, I feel great. I don't need this medication. They throw it out the window.
Yeah.
And then they hit that, I forget the phrase you use, but it's the valley. They hit that deep valley, and then they're desperate for help. So you're right. We don't ever want to use medication or treatment to erase someone's personality. It's wonderful, wonderful. But we do want to keep you safe. We do want to keep you from doing crazy, impulsive, potentially harmful things when you're in a manic phase. We want to keep you from committing suicide or getting vegetative when you're in a depressive phase. Now, going to your question about what do loved ones do, that's a big line, a tricky line to walk. A lot of family members want to be therapists or psychologists or psychiatrists. You don't know how to do that. So please, I tell family, don't, this sounds terrible, but kind of keep your opinions to yourself. You don't know, I never say this to them, you don't know enough about this, but I caution them, you're not this person's therapist. Don't function as the person's therapist. However, you want to get them help, and you want to tell the person, I want to get you help. And 9 times out of 10, the person deep down, no matter what they say, they're crying for help. So you can, as a family member, appeal to somebody and say, I really want to get you help, and this is why. Now, the other side of that tricky line is enabling. I get calls all the time from church leaders, for example, about people in their church, and they say, there's a brother, there's a sister in my church, has this problem, and that problem. What do you think's going on? And I'll say, well, it sounds like this or that, and they really need to do this or that. Can they, do you want them to come in so I can evaluate them? And they say, yeah, let me go ahead and make an appointment. And I'm like, no, that's not your role. You can't enable the person. They have to have some skin in the game for treatment. They have to have some skin in the game. So I say, why are you calling me to the ministry leader? Have that person call me. They have to go through the effort of making an appointment, or else when they get here, they're only here because you insist on it or you want them here. They have to be motivated. So with the exception of someone who's imminently dangerous to self or others, you want to urge them to get help, not be their therapist, and go up to that line where you're not enabling them, but you are saying, I will drive you. You make an appointment. I'll drive you there. I'll pay for your first visit. I'll do whatever it takes to help you. But you have to have some skin in the game, or else it's going to go nowhere. And of
So true.
course, like I said, the exception to that is when someone's imminently harmful to self or others. That's when you need to call. If you can't get this person to get help, you got to call someone that can, the police or some other authority.
Good stuff. As we start wrapping up, heading down the home stretch here, I mentioned it, but for me, I've figured out, I mean, it's not a perfect science, it's an art, it's understanding. I've done so much soul work, I've done so much study, just from brain science to psychology to physics to quantum mechanics to, philosophy to, I just couldn't get enough to try to understand myself. And I, I always teach the kids, your brain, this 3.5-pound organ is there for you. It's not supposed to run you. You got to manage it. You got to pay attention, get involved in the conversation and know the signs for yourself. But like you said, sometimes not easy to see, when you're in it. Right. And so there's some routines in my life that are sacred, and that my beautiful wife, Terry, who is more than a suitable helper, it's been challenging for her, but we found our way, and we have routines. And I work real hard. I love what I do. But when I get home at night, 6 o'clock, whatever, man, we walk the dogs in the park and we kind of talk about our day. We get home and we cook together. Well, she cooks. I'm the sous chef. I just chop stuff up or whatever. And we share a meal together. The phones go off and they do not come back on unless it's a 911 from a family or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'll say it, we take a bath together every night and just kind of relax and unwind and connect. And then we go and watch our shows, you know what I'm saying? And the roots, when I say I don't pay attention to social media or the news, I'm saying I don't. People are like, what are you talking about? You blast all the time. I do, I blast. And then I come back and I comment to somebody that's commenting, but I really pay attention to the content that is getting into my brain. I don't watch the talking heads on TV. I read it. If I want to know what's going on with China or Russia or what's going on with, some violence in our country, whatever, I'm staying up on it. It's important to my work. But I'm not just going to let whatever, come into my headspace because, I've got a good way to manage it. But I don't even know if there's a question in that. I guess there is. How important are routines, or what I said about learning to manage the brain, and instead of confusing, I'm not my brain. I have one, but I'm not. I'm bigger. I'm the watcher, the witness. But I don't know. Go anywhere you want to go with that.
No, absolutely, man. You've got to. Let's take someone with deep depression. There's a couple of things we recommend right away, even before medication. One of them is staying on a routine. The worst, or when you have anxiety, the worst thing you can do is nothing, because you're just going to ruminate. You're going to dwell on your problems, and it's going to be a rabbit hole, and it's going to be a snowball that gets bigger and bigger. Worst thing you can do is nothing. So I urge people, to the extent that they're able at the moment, to get on a routine. You set some things in stone. I'm going to get up at this time. I'm going to go to bed at this time. I'm going to exercise at this time. And I want to say more about that in a second. I'm going to have my routines with family, even if I don't feel like it. This is very therapeutic to get yourself up. And even though you might be vegetative, where it's the last thing you want to do, I'm so tired, I don't get any enjoyment out of this. This is the best way to blast yourself out of it. I mean, you like I said, the worst thing you can do is nothing. Once you're in a routine and it's the same thing every day, eventually it gets set in stone. It becomes a habit, and you don't even have to think about it.
Right.
One of those that I'm really insistent on is exercise, which is one of the first line treatments for depression. Even before we look at medication, things like that, when we're looking at lifestyle changes you can make. Exercise, and I could do another podcast on that, but is so important because it releases endorphins. It keeps you from ruminating. Exercise has so many benefits. And once again, a lot of patients physically, especially the patients we see here in our family medicine clinic, they have multiple physical problems: diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia. They've got a whole bunch of things, obesity, that prevent them from exercising. And I say, you do what you can do. And we talk about that in some detail. And then I say, I want you to commit to 3 sessions a week of at least 30 minutes to start out with, 3 days a week, where you're going to set this in stone. I don't care what's going on, unless, there's a nuclear holocaust going on around you, you're going to do this. And by moderate exercise, I say it's got to be something that's strenuous enough where you can't have a conversation with somebody at the same time.
Okay.
So even if it's just, I've got plenty of patients who can only walk out to their mailbox and back, and that's their exercise. That's fine. As long as you're exerting yourself enough to not have a conversation, do that 3 times a day. Take as much time as you need to get it done. My wife and I work long hours here. We actually live about an hour away from where we work, an hour away from where we live. We put in a long day at work. We have this hour and 10-minute long commute to get home. It is a rare day that I don't drag my sorry butt to one of my exercise things, swimming, using the rowing machine, getting on the elliptical, doing a thing on TV, a pre-programmed thing. It's a rare day that I don't do that, because it scares me not to, because this is so important when it comes to health and mood. The other thing we talk about is diet. There's a ton of things coming out these days about the relationship between the gut and the brain, gut health. So we, here where I work, we have a nutritionist, thank goodness, who coaches patients, but just watching what you eat, sticking to something close to the Mediterranean diet, all the benefits it yields. So exercise and being careful about your diet, being careful with not necessarily abstaining completely from alcohol, but curtailing it within healthy limits. Right. Caffeine, you have to look at the whole package, which brings me to the most important point. Every mental illness has the same components. There's a biological component, a psychological component, a social component, and a spiritual component. Until you address each one of those things, you're not going to make a lot of headway. The biological thing is things like medication and making sure there's no other biological cause for your depression or anxiety, like thyroid disease or something. The psychological component of it is the way you're built, the way you think. Are you a kind of a negative person or a generally positive person? Do you tend to deny or repress things? The social component is the way you grew up. Were you abused? Did you live in a family that was critical or a family that was very accepting? And then there's a spiritual, which is the part that's ignored by most traditional physicians, because that's, I don't care who you are. If you're an atheist, if you're a dead set, I'm an extreme atheist, I guarantee you, when you're in the depths of depression, you're going to be praying to somebody or something. And that's often ignored. When you're on your deathbed, I don't care what you've said about God, you're going to be praying to somebody. So those 4 things all need to be addressed. As long as you're looking at all 4 of those, you're going to make some headway.
Sounds great. This has been rich. I'm gonna share one more thing, and then you can give us final thoughts. But as I wrestled with this, there was no doubt I wanted you as the guest. Yeah, I trust you, and you've helped me. Yeah, I totally dig you. We have a good time. You're funny. But anyway, like I said, it wasn't an if, but a when. And so after I'd wrestled with it and prayed about it and got advice about it, I was like, all right. But then I was like, okay, when and how do I do this? It's not like I'm going to come out on Facebook. Guess what, people? A lot of people might do it like that. I'm like,
right.
Nah. And so I honestly, and I wouldn't probably, advise this, but I prayed and I said, you tell me when it's time, and I'll listen. And so I'm on a stage in LA, and I'm preaching to a pretty big audience, and I'm rolling, and I'm talking about blessings and curses, and I'm talking about this whole wonderfully made, but you have the thorn, learn to value the thorn. And then it was like, and I said, I'm gratefully addictive and wonderfully bipolar. And I was like, damn. It's just like,
Did I just say that? Yeah.
I know. And there was this nervous laughter. And it was kind of like, and I said, without any kind of vibe, I said, why y'all laughing? And they were like, oh. And then, and I was like, so I was like, I'm out. And then I messed around. I said, now don't tell anybody. It was being recorded, streamed live, everything. And I said, and, pray for me because I don't know how this is going to work out, so we were laughing about it. But I was approached afterwards. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for telling. And I closed with this. I was like, blessings or curses. I used to look at it, man, this is a curse. How'd you make me like that? But then I made peace with it. But and they're fine with me sharing about this. But my beautiful daughter I'm so proud of her. She's a little soldier in recovery. She's 2.5 years sober and she's 24. And I'm like, whoa. Imagine that, grabbing onto this thing. And now, okay, so is my addictive nature a blessing or a curse? It's a blessing. I'm 20 years out ahead of her and we go to meetings together. I mean, it's a beautiful connection we have. So definitely a blessing. I wouldn't trade it. You take away me. And then all of a sudden my daughter's walking through something that, God bless any parent that's scared but doesn't know what to do. Their child is suffering and they don't even know it. And then all of a sudden self-harm, things can happen. But then also this disorder, it's a curse. It can't be a blessing. But now my son, who's 27, he's walking on that path. Is it a blessing or a curse? Oh, no doubt it's a blessing because I'm 20 years ahead of him. So when he's in the valley, I know the way out. Mm-hmm. I know the pathway. I'm saying, come on. So is it a blessing? Is it a curse? That's, I'm feeling it deep. And when we're up on the mountaintop, I can kind of hold him down a little bit, be that governor. And so I say to people who are listening, we've talked about a lot of solutions here, but you don't have to be open like I am. I feel like I'm supposed to, what I'm saying? I want to help people, but you need to talk to somebody. And if you have somebody in your life that you're worried about, trust your hunch and, and encourage them, but we need people around us. And then, just kind of embrace how you're made. And I'm so glad you mentioned exercise. I mean, that's at 5 o'clock, I'm in the gym, 6 o'clock, I get home and routines. I have to go work out. And then diet, I've got a chef for a wife. I eat like a king at night. I'm blessed like that. So I'm so grateful, but any final thoughts, anywhere you want to go?
Well, when you said, is it a blessing? I feel like this is a blessing. What worried me is there are people out there listening to this that are going to say, this is not a blessing. This is a curse. I've never felt this bad. This is the worst experience I can imagine. I'm in pain. This is not a blessing, kid. What are you talking about? You're saying it from the standpoint of wisdom of having years of this in your rearview mirror and getting used to the idea of treatment. But there are plenty of people who are not even close to there yet. I would like your listeners to know, thank goodness we live in a country where there's always help available. In every community, even the rural ones, all over the place, there are public mental health systems. Yes, they're overwhelmed. Yes, they're overworked. Yes, you might have to wait a long time unless it's an acute emergency. Even if you end up in an ER at a hospital, you might have to wait a long, long time. But our system is set up to help you get help. Worst comes to worst. I'm going to prop up my young family physicians. That's a good place to start. The local family, your family physician knows who's good to refer you to, who not to refer you to. They usually have their finger on the pulse of resources close by. And of course, there's all the national initiatives, the suicide hotline, addiction hotlines, all kinds of things like that. So there is help. You don't have to shout it from the mountaintops. You can get it. Our whole mental health system is established on a system of confidentiality where you can seek help and no one, I'm not saying don't let anyone know about it. You need help from your family, your friends, and your peers. That's the social part of the biopsychosocial spiritual. But there's plenty of ways to get help. If you got a phone or a computer, all you have to do is Google it and you'll have plenty of resources. So if any of this, if you've listened and it's played a chord to you, please get help. You feel like it's not the mountaintop or the blessing right now, but you will.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much. I knew this was going to be good. I'm very, very happy with it. I hope, and I believe it's going to help people. And to those that are listening, watching, tune back in, because hopefully you've seen in some of our other episodes, we're going to talk about stuff that sometimes people don't want to talk about. And I think people want that. And so please come back and join us. The Power of Peace podcast. There is incredible power in peace. And we talk about ways to get there. So we'll see you soon. Thanks, Dr. Shapiro.
Man,
you
thanks,
are a
kid.
rock star. Y'all the best.